4-year-old, this old house. And I worked for Uncle Sam 1 year, and the rest of the time I've been right around here.
You mean if you worked for him about a year, you must have been in the armed services?
I was. Yeah, I was in World War One.
We'll try to remember to come back to that and ask you where you were and so on, the unit you served in, where you trained or whatever. Do you remember anything about your school days?
Sure. I went to Bradley School first, and then I went up to Pleasant Valley. The last of my schooling was at Pleasant Valley.
Mm-hmm. Do you happen to remember any teacher you ever had, maybe?
Yeah, I sure do. The first one I went to was Hattie Fields. She lived at Benton. That is at Bradley School. And Nettie Reeder, she taught at Bradley School. And over to Pleasant Valley, Ruby Shamel was one of my teachers. And Isla Mae Bonnier was another one of my teachers over at Pleasant Valley.
Well, you're remembering them real well there. I'm not sure I can remember all of mine that way.
Get you a chair.
That's all right. I just thought I'd sit here on this little hassock. What do you like most about school?
Well, I just love to go to school. Of course, I love to play.
Mm-hmm.
When, of course, I done most of the playing when I was younger, you know. And then I got up to where I kind of shut my eyes and opened them around the girls.
Well, that's always one of the wonderful things about going to school.
That's right. That's right.
Do you have any spelling bees? Or?
Oh yeah, we'd have spelling matches and things like that.
All right, after your school days, I want to ask you, before we do that, your parents.
Their name?
Mm-hmm.
My daddy's name was Jack Hunt, and my mother's name was Adeline Smith Hunt.
Yes.
And this is the father of my mother.
And Mr. Hunt is pointing to a picture of a soldier, and that appears to be about the War of 1861.
That's my granddad. He was a captain in the War of 61.
You remember his name?
Captain John Smith.
And he served, do you remember, did he ever tell you about where any battles he was in?
No. My mother told me about a few things that happened after the war was over, you know. They'd go around and take horses. So they took 1 year, my granddad took the mare and left the colt and just carried her over across the field and put her in a stable and they nickered to one another through the night. That is one thing that she told me.
Mm-hmm.
And of course there's others, but can't recollect right. Yes, I do one more. And my granddad hid his harness on the sill of his grain barn between the sleepers to keep him from taking his harness. That's another thing they done, you know.
Those were wild, scary times, weren't they?
That's right.
I've heard my grandfather talk about they'd come and if you'd killed hogs, they'd take your hams and shoulders and middling meat and everything.
Anything, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A lot of those, I guess, were operating as guerrillas, and they might not have been in the regular forces. Yeah.
Now, there's on the other side from granddad. My granddad is on the winning side.
In other words, he fought in the Union Army.
That's right. Of course, that is before my days, but what I'm a-telling my mother told me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. We want the story, and it's a very interesting story to me. Well, Mr. Hunt, your dad was what, a farmer?
He was a farmer, little farmer. Yeah.
What did
My granddad lived right over here, and we lived up here about a quarter of a mile. And when he died, we moved down here to his place, and lived all these years over there.
Well, what did you like about farming? Was there any part of it that you enjoyed?
Back in my young days, I didn't enjoy too much of it, but I reckon after I got to working and making money out of it, I liked it some better.
What was your money crop?
Back then, our money crop was tobacco. That's right. One year, I had 3 acres of good dark tobacco. It brought $105.
Now, that was a considerable amount of money for then, was it?
Well, it is a right smart of money, but that is a whole lot of tobacco.
Yes, sir. I've heard several people say, Mr. Hunt, that they went through a period there when they were organizing an association, and some farmers wanted to join and some didn't, and neighbors would get mad at one another, and they had a period they called the Night Riders. Do you remember anything about that?
A little of it back. I was just small, I reckon, then, but it wasn't right around. It was back over on the river, I think. Seems to me like it's where the Night Riders was.
Mm-hmm. They never did come and try to whip you or anything.
No, and I was proud they didn't.
Of course. All right, when you were growing up, could you tell us something about the amusements you engaged in then? What, did you go to square dances or something?
That's right. I went to square dances, churches, and play parties, and my starting in going with the girls, I had a horse and buggy.
You were a young sport, weren't you?
I thought I was. Yeah, that was the way we started out, was horses and buggies. And fact is, I got married, and I was still using the horse and buggy then, 19 and 23.
Well, you know, my father bought a new buggy in 1930. Now, they were about to go out then, but he still loved them.
The first buggy I bought give $77.50 for it, and I run it 3 years, and I got another one that cost $97.50, and that is along about 19 and 18, I guess, when I bought this second one. And of course, that was right smart of money then, but now I don't know what if you could buy a buggy, I don't know what it'd cost you. $300 or $400, I imagine.
I imagine so. Did it have rubber tires on it?
Oh yeah.
The very latest.
Yeah.
What was your favorite brand?
George Delker.
Good. I've heard my dad say that was his favorite. The George Delker, made in Henderson, Kentucky, I believe he said.
I believe so.
There were several of those Delker plants, and they later made furniture. I believe there was a George Delker and the Delker brothers, and so on and so on.
Anyhow, they were good buggies.
All right. Did you afterwards in your farm? Did you farm all your life?
Well, I did up till through the 30s. I worked in timber and logs, and through the 40s, I worked out of the ASC office here at Benton, measured ground, and at first I went around and to say how much milk your cows give and such as that. See, that we was instructed to tell them, the farmers, if we'd furnish the food, French would do the fighting. And so that's what I told them. And wasn't long though that it had all changed. So I worked at that for 8 years, working for the ASC office, measuring ground and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think my father said, I don't know whether the President Wilson ever said this or not, but some of his supporters around here said, vote for Wilson and there'll be no war. Is that true?
I believe I heard that, yeah.
But we did get in the war anyway.
That's right. Now this World War II I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking about World War II, and I'm talking about World War I. You were in World War I, you said.
Yeah.
Where did you train?
Well, I first went to Louisville, and then from there to Louisiana.
Was that Camp Taylor?
Yeah. I was only up there, I don't know, 10 or 12, 15 days, and then they sent me to Camp Bogar, Louisiana. And I was there, I guess, about 30 days. And I got on the ship for France the 6th of August, landed in France 18th August, and we stayed around there a while, and they mustered us out, and I went in the Alsace trenches.
So you actually did get in some of the battles before the war ended.
I was in the Alsace trenches.
Yeah.
And
Was this 1917 or 1918?
It was in 1918.
And the war then ended November the 11th.
Uh-huh. I was in the Oregon forest then.
Uh-huh. That was one of the worst battles of all, wasn't it?
That's right.
Did some of your friends get killed?
No, my company, we fell out to go in action. And we could see the Germans were running, just scattered men. There's where we was going in action. And come to find out, they had left a few men over there, Germans had, to hold the line till their main army got back. And so we didn't ever go in there. And we went on around and went in a church where they left at 11 o'clock. We went in at 2. And we slept on their straw where they slept the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And what crawled on them crawled on us.
I've heard there were a lot of bugs around.
And the trouble of it was we was up there where we couldn't get nothing, couldn't get no delousers or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't get to delouse along about last of November.
Now, you sailed out of one of the Gulf ports. When you came home, where did you land?
We sailed from Brest, France, and landed in
New York?
Fort News, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
That is right there. Anyhow, it's right close to New York.
Yeah. And then you came home by train, I presume.
Uh-huh. Just like 2 days being gone a year.
Uh-huh. Well,
And
in
I
many
think
ways,
I think I seen all over France hiking.
yeah, you walked all over
That's
France.
right.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting story. And you came back then from World War I, and You weren't married when you went in service?
No, I wasn't.
Well, tell me something about your courtship.
Well, I started going with my wife in 1920, I believe. And
Was she from around here?
yeah, just my neighbor up here, Ollie Hurst. And we married in 1920. That is about a 2.5-year courtship, I reckon.
You took it slow. You want to make sure, didn't you?
Oh, well, I don't know how come, but that's the way it happened.
Yeah. Now, you had some children.
Yeah, 2 children. Had a boy, Billy Harrison Hunt, and a girl is Leviathan Hunt Powell.
And we're in her home right now. Is that right?
We're in my home.
You're in your home, yeah, okay.
She lives in Benton.
Oh, she lives in Benton. She's just visiting you then.
Ah, she's my daughter.
And you live by yourself, more or less?
Well, you see, my wife just died,
Yes, sir. I'm.
and she's staying with me till I recover.
Mm-hmm.
You
Now,
might know her husband. He works there at the Bank of Benton, Victor Powell.
Oh, I certainly know Victor Powell. He's a vice president, isn't he?
That's right. Been there over, well, I think about 22 or 3 years.
Well, I've done some banking with them, so I'm acquainted with him very much.
I started, I think, in 1914 with them. Still with them.
Mm-hmm. All right. You have a grandson too, as we started out, and
2.
Yeah.
And I got 1 great and 1 great girl.
well now
Rain Powell that told you has a boy and a girl.
Oh, he does. Well, I didn't know that. So you're really blessed with great grandchildren. Now that makes what, 5 generations, doesn't it?
I believe that's right, yeah.
All right. After you and your wife married, did you continue to farm here most?
Yes, sir, I did.
And then you were telling me, of course, about the crop measurements and other things in which you engaged.
Well, I told you about working for Ray. See, I done carpenter work through the 50s.
All right.
One more thing. This daughter of mine was named after the ship that I come back on,
What was that?
Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
The big Leviathan steamship, 16,000 of us soldiers and 2,100 sailors, crew, come back on it.
My, that's more than a standard division, isn't it? That's an enormous.
That was the biggest ship on the waters.
Uh-huh.
Made it in 6 days. And that is not quick enough.
But you know, that's really moving to cross 3,000 miles of water in 6 days.
I named her after the ship. And you don't never hear of nobody else being named that.
No, sir, I don't believe I have, although I've seen that word in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
And it refers to a giant whale, I guess, that they were talking about.
There's lots of folks asking me how to spell it. Spell her name.
Mm-hmm. Is it Leviathon?
A-N.
A-N, all right.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, let's get back to a little more about what life was like as you were growing up. Do you remember your first automobile?
Yeah, I remember it all right, but I might not remember just when, but I guess it was along about.
Oh, you don't have to give the exact date. I just thought you might have had some experience with them.
1928, I believe.
You didn't break your arm cranking it, did you?
No, but sometimes it needed cranking. It was a little Ford Roadster.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, a little Ford Roadster.
And, you know, they left that crank hole in there way on up toward, well, I guess it's after World War II. They didn't just have the crank hanging there like a Model T did, but they still had a place for one.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right, what about your first radio? Do you remember anything about that? What were some of the programs that you liked in the early days? You listened to Lum and Abner?
Yeah, that is one of them that I listened to.
I know that's my dad's favorite. He liked those old Eddard sayings they talked about.
I believe that must have been along about time 1936 when we first got our radio.
Well, what was Benton like when you were growing up? Do you remember anything about the town, any of the merchants, or what's changed about it, or the store?
I sure do. I recollect the first 4 automobiles there was in Benton. And as Mr. Farmer, he is the cashier of the bank in Benton, president, and Mr. Ogletree and Joe Darnley, sheriff, he had one. You see, Mr. Farmer, Dr. Stilley was the 4 first cars that I recollect. And back then there wasn't no walks around the courthouse. They was posts set with a big chain run through it to hitch your horses to.
We didn't have any parking meters.
Oh, I reckon you'd call them meter. You just drive up there and tie your horse to that chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wasn't no just gravel streets. Or I don't know, might have just been mud. Seemed like there was mud around them where you'd hitch.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, it's changed a lot since then, hasn't it?
Oh, you
I was here a while back. A lady at church showed me a picture. In fact, she gave me a copy of it, and it showed that chain stretched around the courthouse. It was a picture of Big Singing Day in 1904, and that yard was just covered in horses and buggies and wagons.
Tater wagons all around.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't miss a big singing back then.
All right. What about?
See, I recollect when the courthouse burnt. Courthouse burnt out Benton back. Don't just recollect, but
I think it was 1914. I've read that.
well, I guess that's right. Long back then, I'm sure.
I had a man at Calvert City that I interviewed recently that sang me a song about, to the tune of Casey Jones, about the man that burned the courthouse. So that made an interesting program. Well, were you ever sick a great deal in your early days, or you had good health?
No, I was.
I was going to ask you what remedies you used to. Did they ever give you castor oil?
Back when I was small, that's what they used. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I never was sick very much. I got my leg broke back when I was 18-year-old.
You ever drink any sassafras tea?
Well, yeah, and sometime it'd be a little strong.
Now, what was that supposed to do anyway?
I don't know. We used to make cider, you know. And sometimes when it was about 10 days hard, why, your head gets to swimming every once in a while.
Yes, sir. Well, that was one of the fun things that you did, I guess, on the farm was to make cider, kill hogs. Tell us about hog killing. Did you kill hogs every year?
You know, I've thought of something else. My granddaddy Smith there had an old groundhog thresher, and he turned that into a cider mill. Them old groundhog thresher, you know, you work 3 mules to it, went around and around. That pulled the thresher to thresh wheat. Well, he turned that into a sorghum mill, and he had a big box there that hold a wagon bed full of apples. Well, he could grind that wagon bed full of apples there in about 30 or 40 minutes. And he had 2 presses where they put them pummels, you know, and squeeze that cider out. But that was exciting to see them mules go around and around there.
Yes, sir.
And them apples going down through that cylinder was a thresher cylinder, you know. Yeah. And now what was the other question you asked me?
Well, I'm afraid we're just about out of time. I want to ask you one thing. If there's any other story you'd like to tell, do you have anything on your mind you'd like to?
I can't think right now, but I just happened to think about that old threshing machine.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. I'm glad to hear that. And you made sorghum in a similar way, didn't you, with a mule walking around?
Yeah, but you mashed the sorghum.
Mm-hmm.
See, you didn't tire them, you just mashed the stalks.
Mm-hmm. Squeezed the juice out, and then you cooked it in pans till it was properly done.
Yeah.
That is a right good skill, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've done a lot of that. My daddy had a mill. Yeah, we'd make molasses and carry them off in barrels to Paducah and sell them to the vendor factory.
Mr. Hunt, it's been a real joy to me to visit with you, and I appreciate your inviting me in, or at least your grandson did, and we're glad that you cooperated so well, and we hope you have many fine years yet.
I've just enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. This is Ray Mofield. We're signing off now and returning you to our studios.